I've been at GMBN now for over 4 years and we've still not made a Meet the Presenter video. So today we're going to look at how I got into the bike industry, follow my journey back to the beginning and see where it all started. So if we go back to the very beginning, my love of bikes, I guess you could say it was in the family. My father and his brother both rode everywhere, in fact. In particular, my dad rode from the UK all the way to Cortina in the Italian Alps on an old, I think it was a Holdsworth that he used to ride, and it had flip-flop gearing on there. So it had a climbing gear and a descending gear, and you literally, once you get to top of climb, take your rear wheel out, flip it around for your descent. Seems pretty wild, but all the stories of my dad touring with his friends over the years, obviously it made some headway into what I wanted to do with myself. And living in Pinner, which is where I grew up in suburban London, well, kind of in Middlesex really, quite close to London, I was lucky enough to have an old collapsed chalk mine probably 5 minutes from the house I grew up in. So I would literally spend every waking hour in the woods there. It was called the Dingles, and I think really that kind of gave me my foundation for mountain biking. I learned all my early skills in there, steep drops, jumps, tabletops, all that sort of stuff. But one of my dad's closest friends, a guy called Peter Walker, had a mountain bike at the time and introduced me to Mountain Biking UK magazine, and he gave me the first probably 10 or 11 copies from issue #1, and I still have that very magazine. And I read it cover to cover. I read all of them cover to cover, studied them, and then got a subscription to the magazine. And I just knew whatever I was going to do in life, it had to be to do with mountain bikes. So at high school, yeah, you could say I was an average student. You know, I could apply myself quite well if I really wanted to. The trouble was, my head was only ever thinking about bikes. I mean, literally, I'm a lifelong mountain bike fan. So I was thinking of any possible way I can do anything to do with bikes, I'm all in. So work experience for me, when I was at school, I went to a local bike shop, which was called The Bike Shop. It's in North Harrow, 511 Pinner Road. It's still there, I'm really proud to say. And I've got fond memories, you know, yeah, cool. You know, I was like the young kid, I used to make more cups of tea than doing anything else. But I learned so much about the trade, so much about bikes, a lot about road bikes actually in the early days, because they were all roadies and I was the outcast mountain biker in the shop. But bit by bit, the tide started turning as mountain biking grew in popularity. And I then went on to college really, because again, trying to figure out the things I liked. My sister was doing journalism studies and various other things at Bristol Polytechnic at the time, and it just seemed the most interesting thing to me. I was already into photography, I was into bikes, and I was good at writing. That was like probably my strength at school. I was really good with English. So I did a journalism course, and I needed to get work experience at the #1 magazine at the time, which is Mountain Biking UK. Of course, the mag that I'd read from the very beginning. And I sent letter after letter and I got nothing back. Tried ringing them, nothing. And to the point I almost gave up, and eventually, and I can't even think how many times I got turned down, but eventually I got a letter back saying, yeah, we've got a window, so you can come do work experience for a week. And literally dropped what I was doing, went to Bath, stayed with my sister who was living in Bath at the time, which is super handy. I did a week's work experience there. But the thing that I had that I think many other work experience kids at the time didn't have was I really, really wanted a job there. I wasn't just trying to get a foot in the door and do stuff. Like, I really, really wanted to show what I could do. So I think from, you know, I was writing reviews, I was doing some bit of sub editing, and I'm pretty sure I built a set of wheels as well in that first week, and they were quite shocked that someone my age could come in and just do that quite flippantly. I went away from that work experience with a set of Stratos FR4 forks, a twin crown 4-inch travel slalom forks, and Paul Smith, who was the technical editor of the magazine at the time, he said, take these away and write me like a 1500 word review or whatever it was at the time. And he said, look, this isn't for print, but I just want to see where you are and see what you understand. But it kind of went a bit wrong, because I actually ended up snapping those forks in half, and I broke my nose, my cheek, my eye socket, my ear was kind of hanging off, and I slid down the road on my head basically. And I wrote a letter to the magazine. In fact, I sent it to Paul Smith, the letters, here we go, telling him exactly what happened. And the managing editor, to my shock, sent me a personal letter shortly after that, saying he liked my style of writing. He liked the fact that I'd laid out the letter correctly. I made him laugh. I made a point in there about the products. And he said there's a job going. And he said, look, this isn't a job offer, but you should come and apply for it. So straight up to Bath for a job interview. And the second I walked into the MBK office, I thought I'd ruined it, because everyone else that applied for the job, they were wearing suits. And I walked in a basketball vest, a pair of shorts, chain around my neck with spiky hair. And I thought I messed it up, but turns out that got me noticed as well. So talked my way through the interview, thinking I'd failed it miserably. Never heard back from the magazine. And I think probably 2 or 3 weeks later, I rang them to say, hey, I'm moving house. Can I give you my change of address? Because I'd still like to get the letter that tells me I didn't get the job. And they're like, oh no, you got the job. Can you start next week? And I was like, what? So I quit my job on the spot at Action Bikes in Staines. And the accounts lady there actually paid me an extra month and wished me luck. So I moved straight to Bath, basically, and started work at MBK magazine 2 days after my 21st birthday. And the weirdest thing was, this day at work, which I didn't know about until I got there, was going out with a bunch of MBK readers. So I still kind of classed myself as an MBK reader then, because I hadn't actually done any work there. And they were like, oh, you the new guy? And they seemed to know more about me than I knew what was going on. Yeah, and went straight in the magazine. So that one, autumn 2001, I went straight into being in the magazine. And it turned out that was kind of a bit of a thing for my career, that I'd just go straight in to whatever I was doing and just get on with it. It seemed to work.
So what was your role when you first started?
I was editorial assistant when I first started. So I think the job they had open was a more senior role originally. It was for staff writer. So I started as editorial assistant. So that was a combination of things, you know, the old joke, you know, making the tea and stuff like that. But jokes aside, there was things like that. Also things like getting slides processed and things. Bear in mind, there was no digital back then. You know, photographers would come in, you'd get sheets, like contact sheets basically. You'd be looking through those, trying to select the right images to go with certain features in the magazine. And it took a long time. They'd get those sent off for scanning, and then would come back, you'd have to make sure the scans were the right way around, because transparencies, you could get them flipped accidentally. So if you had an art editor, for example, that was a freelancer and not a biker, quite often it'd be accidental to have a bike and the image be flipped. So it might sound funny thinking about that now with digital stuff, but it was a common problem in the print days. And yeah, I used to write reviews for the magazine, not straight away. They encouraged me, in fact, Paul Smith encouraged me to just ride as many bikes as I could. He basically said, you know, there's no point you review anything, you need to build up your basis of knowledge. And even though I'd, you know, had a decade of riding and racing bikes anyway, it wasn't the same as working on a magazine with this sheer amount and volume of products coming in and out. So I made it my mission to familiarise myself with as many bikes as possible, and just rode, constantly riding bikes. Riding during work time, riding after work, riding at lunchtimes, riding at weekends. Pretty much a different bike every time. Riding with different gloves, you know, different glove on each hand, different shoe on each foot, literally anything possible to build up my base. And that kind of went on for the entire time I worked there, to be honest.
What did your role progress into?
I think when I left, I was features editor. So I pretty much couldn't go any higher doing the job I wanted to do. The next step would have been to go up to be editor in a magazine, and that would have required me being a bit hands-off, and that's really not for me. It would have been a great career move to do that, but being features editor as well as that, you know, I was choosing and I was responsible for the features that went into the magazine, whether I was writing them or they're being commissioned to freelancers to write. And it still meant I got to travel lots, I got to write, I got to work with so many amazing people over the years.
What would you say the most memorable trip or feature you created at MBK?
Do you know, there's so many memorable. I'll talk about just a few if that's all right. So the first majorly memorable thing was my first trip to Whistler, because I had no idea what Whistler was. Bearing in mind, the magazine I wrote for was Mountain Biking UK. Okay, so we specialised in talking about what was going on in the UK. So I went on a Marzocchi press camp, basically. So they were launching a new fork, or whatever it was at the time. So they sent you flight details, and they're like, get on this plane, basically, we'll pick you up at Vancouver Airport. So I turned up, and I think I didn't have any gloves. I had an open face helmet. I might have had knee pads, but that would have been it. And then a kind of penny dropped on me. I was like, hold on, there's an entire side of mountain biking that I have no idea about. Didn't know what Whistler was. So I went up, and not knowing how to grade myself against stuff, I rode B-line, and remember thinking, oh, this is a bit boring. There must be something better than this. And I bumped into Wade Simmons and Brett Tippie down at the bottom, and they were like, hey, you should come ride with us. And I was like, oh my God, that's that's practically Wade Simmons over there, and they know my name. So I went and did a couple of runs with them, and they were like, can you jump? And I was like, well, yeah, I can jump, but I probably can't jump like you guys can. And they were like, you're coming with us. Hit everything on the way down, and just remember just laughing with Tippy screaming at people on the way through, because there used to be an old section with a fast bit with a catch berm right, and you could overtake people if you were quick. And he's like, get the f*** out the way, they're coming through. And just remember thinking, like, I cannot go on the brakes because Wade Simmons is behind me. Like, it's ridiculous.
Who would you say you've learned the most from in terms of bikes and photography?
A few different people, to be honest. Guy Kesteven, I'd have to say, probably the most experienced bike tester out there, period. I don't know anyone that's ridden half as much as Guy has. And his encyclopedic knowledge is, I mean, I think I've got a really good encyclopedic knowledge of stuff, but Guy's is just next level. He's some kind of wizard, I swear. Astonishing. If I've ever got any questions about stuff, it's always Guy that I'll ring. He is just like the oracle for mountain biking for me. But when it comes to the creative side of things, I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have worked with some of the best photographers on earth. You know, modern photographers that people will know of, like Sven Martin, for example. Worked with him many times over the years. But I've got to say, Steve Bear, he's still an amazing photographer. Seb Rogers, who now is behind Cranked magazine, astonishing photographer. And Russell Burton. Now, I'm particularly fond, no offense to the other two guys, of Russ Burton, because Russ and I spent many years traveling on MBUK, and although I was always in front of his camera, I was always using his spare camera. And every time he was composing shots, I was just in awe of how he worked. He still is, I think, one of the very best photographers I've ever worked with, and I've definitely drawn influence from his style myself.
Who inspired you the most while being a journalist?
Wow, I mean, I was inspired by so many people as a journalist. I was inspired by the riders and the racers out there, but also the people I was working with. And probably the most important person was Steve Warland, who sadly is no longer with us, but he, in my opinion, was one of the best mountain bike, well, one of the best cycling journalists that's ever lived. Now, Steve had such respect in the bike industry amongst all bike designers. He was really diplomatic, and yes, he would say if a product was bad, he would crucify the product. But he would also have spoken to the designers and the bike brands and everyone about that product for doing so. He wouldn't just like drop a bomb and annoy people. He would want to find out why it's like that, what they're going to do to improve that product. And he had such an interesting way of researching things. He was constantly trying new things, and he was a hell of a rider as well. You know, I couldn't help but look up to Steve, and I still do, to be honest, because I don't think I'd been half the writer if it wasn't for Steve Warland. And in fact, I won that, which is one of my proudest things ever. Only thing I've ever won, and it was something that really counted for me. And actually that was really emotional. I'd like to have said some words about Steve at the time, but honestly, I didn't think I was going to win this. Went up to London for the awards, and when they read my name out, I was completely choked and basically couldn't say anything. I basically just said thanks, took the award, and felt like a bit of an idiot, to be honest, but I feel like Steve would have laughed.
Have you had a low point in your career?
Do you know what? There's been a few low points. You know, like everyone has highs and lows. It's just part of life. I guess one of the biggest, well, the biggest low point for me was leaving Mountain Biking UK magazine. So you got to bear in mind how emotional this is for me. That's issue number 1. So that is June 1988. I've read the magazine from the very first issue. I worked for it for 13 and a half years. I forget how many issues and how many words. I could probably work it out in stats. But it was like, it's a thing I'd always wanted to do. And when I'd achieved everything I wanted to achieve there, it was time to move on and progress my career. I think it probably took me 2 years to make that choice. And I still feel a bit sad about it now. That ship sailed, it's great. I learned so much and I'm super thankful for working there. But stepping away was difficult because I felt like I lost a bit of my identity in doing so. But I made the step into the digital world and it's actually made me a better person as well. So although it was low to walk away from it, it got really high really quick after that.
Would you class yourself as a hoarder?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm definitely a hoarder. I mean, I've got stuff literally, I have to open the doors carefully, it's got stuff everywhere. I've got the jersey that matches this as well, so PE's old race pants. Now I've got his jersey from, I think it was 1998. I'm going to say Mont St Anne. I might be wrong on that, where he crashed and broke his shoulder and they cut the jersey off him, and I've got that jersey still with the race plate on it. And actually I've just seen, I'd forgotten about up here. Look at this, this is so old, it's new. This is when I had a subscription to Mountain Biking UK in the 90s. Look at the graphic on that, how sick is that? It's so old, it's almost brand new and on point. And same with the faded blue. Looks like what the 90s kids are wearing.
So what came after MBUK?
A bit of time off actually, just to ride and sort of regroup and stuff, but I did have something in mind. Now there's a distributor called Silverfish, one of the better distributors in the UK, very specialised in picking brands that they really want to work with. They've had Yeti for many years, for example, that they hand-picked. And the owner of Silverfish, Darren Mabbott, owned a website called Factory Jackson. Now he wanted me to run the website for him because he'd owned the website and it was just sat there not doing anything. It was a great opportunity to sort of polish my digital skills, get the camera out again. In fact, I reinvested, bought a load of camera gear. And although I was only working on the website for I think a couple of years, I learned and progressed so much because suddenly I had to do everything myself. I was writing myself, I was studying SEO so I could learn everything about tagging and making sure like anything I wrote was found, building up the social media. You know, I was the photographer, I was the editor, I was the writer, I was everything. And it was an amazing experience. And actually, I can't thank Darren enough for the opportunity of doing that because it was really good fun. I had some great trips, you know, did outdoor. In fact, I had one summer where I probably spent about 6 weeks continuously on the road. Did Verbier, Alpe d'Huez, Leogang, Solbach, Interglen, you know, bang, 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 road trip in between them all. It was a hell of a year riding, that was. Probably one of the best years constantly on the bike I've had. And at the same time as doing that, I was approached by Bike Channel. So this was an Italian TV company that were just starting up in the UK. And they wanted to do a mountain bike show called Mountain Bike Adventures, and they were looking for a host presenter, basically to sort of be a male host. They already had a female host, which was Anna Glowinski, and they had a filmmaker in mind, which was Liam Murphy, who now actually might have seen his stuff with Emily Batty. He does the Ambition series, and he's actually gone on to massive things, does a lot of stuff at Abbey Road Studios, stuff for BBC. Unbelievably talented guy. And the three of us made the Mountain Bike Adventure series on TV. And to start with, you know, I knew what I was talking about, having been a journalist and knowing how to write and script and do stuff like that, but actually having to do it to camera instead of working on stills as the medium I found it quite difficult at first, but Anna was just an amazing presenter and she carried me really well until I sort of found my feet as such. And we worked really well together as a duo, and of course with Liam, the triple act between us. Really good stuff, and I think that definitely changed my direction in my career because I never thought about being a presenter or working in front of the camera. And yeah, it really opened up the sort of the media landscape to me, and accidentally pushed me towards GMBN. So I had no intention of moving from Factory Jackson. I was like really enjoying sort of progressing the career on my own, and I wanted to get some freelancers involved. And a chance meeting with Simon Weir, who was running the company at the time, we ended up just talking about stuff, and he said that he wanted to start a tech channel as a sister channel to GMBN, and he wanted me to do it. And I was kind of a bit like, hold on a second, so I've come in to meet a friend here for a beer after work, and I've just killed time by chatting to the big boss, who I know quite well, and I've come out of it being offered a job. When does that ever happen? So I went away feeling a bit perplexed about this and just didn't really know what to think of it. And he called me back for a meeting another time, and he formally offered me the position to work on GMBN. He said he was really impressed by what I'd done with Factory Jackson, what I'd been doing with the bike channel. He's been watching my sort of career progression and seen me change from being like a print journalist into like an outward facing character as such. And he offered me a job, and I accepted on the spot without even really considering it, and made the move over to GMBN. So my first day at GMBN, well, that was an eye-opener, that's for sure. Bearing in mind I'd come from the print world originally, I'd moved into digital, but I was doing everything myself. Suddenly walking in the door at GMBN, and there was a huge crew of presenters, creators, all the people behind the scenes, like the audience development team. I was a bit like, well, this is crazy. And I walked straight in on a Monday morning, straight into the Monday morning meeting. I wasn't told about that. So that was a bit weird. Had to introduce myself to the whole floor of people involved. And if you're not aware, Play Sports Network has quite a lot of staff. So even then, you know, there was quite a few people to explain myself to. And then Martin Ashton grabbed me and we went straight into the dirt shed and they put me straight on camera. I was not bargaining on that at all. I'd come from the sort of the, you know, working on a fortnightly deadline cycle in a magazine world to working on a daily deadline cycle on the GMBN world. So it was extremely exciting and you really felt the pressure. But yeah, I mean, what a ride it was. Joining a really established team, Blake Sampson, of course, was there. Neil Donoghue was there from day one on GMBN, Martin Ashton, who I've worked with many times over the years, and then me. And I felt a little bit like a fifth wheel, I've got to say, when I started, because I knew in the background that I was going to be working on a tech channel and it had not been yet announced to the viewers of GMBN. So in the background we had ideas and loads of meetings and stuff, and in the meantime I was doing some more of the tech focused content on the main channel, doing some of the maintenance videos and picking up tech content, leaving the other presenters to sort of move aside into other areas of the business. And yeah, and then suddenly the tech channel launched, and it was just like a bomb just went off in life. It's like, oh my god, like what the hell is going on? Suddenly there's a channel, I'm managing a channel, I'm making all this content, and suddenly it feels both hectic and easy because I get to talk about something that is so close to me, and it's been a hell of a ride so far. But hey, there's been some incredible trips, we've done some amazing content. And you know, in the last year, it's definitely been challenging, but actually some of the best content I think has been when we've been restricted in what we're able to make. I made this video where I had to build a bike for Shimano. They asked me to build my ideal bike, like right then, right now, at the moment, and I built a Yeti SB100, which honestly, at that moment, if I could have bought a bike, that probably would have been it. So built the bike, got to ride the bike, talk about actually who I am as a rider and why it counted. And I think that was great because I don't think I've ever got to candidly talk about things that I like. I'm always talking about other people and the bike industry and stuff. So it kind of felt weird to sort of turn the camera around the other way. So that was a definite highlight. And that's me. Hopefully I've answered some of the questions that you wanted to know about where I came from, what I'm doing, why I do it, and what I love in mountain bikes. If there's any more questions, get involved in those comments underneath, and I'm sure we might be able to make another video along those lines. We're quite good at doing that here at GMBN and GMBN Tech, so it seems. Honestly, it's been really cool to actually talk about this stuff, so thank you for everyone that pitched in with some questions. Like I say, get involved in the comments, give us some good feedback, and we'll see you in the next video soon. Ta-ra.